Shabbat Shalom. Now, I don't usually talk about like news and current eventsy things from the B-Man. I'm not starting now, don't worry. But I want to share a little bit about how I felt over the last couple of weeks, and maybe this will speak to people in the room, and if not, you'll let me know at Kiddush in a little bit. Because to say that there's a lot happening in the world right now is a bit of an understatement. I think it was one of the late night guys had a joke the other day that, you know, we grew up with history textbooks that were like, you know, the United States from 1776 to 1865 and things like that, and textbooks in the future are going to say the first half of July 2024 because there's so much that's happening. And because there's a lot happening in the world, and because we see it, all of it, all the time in our pockets whenever we want, it's hard to know how to react, when to react, what to do. And here's the part that's about me. It can become almost debilitating in the knowledge of what am I supposed to do every single time I read about something that's going on, or how am I supposed to feel, or how can I sort of even get through the day on some of this. And we see two examples of reactions in the Torah that we read today and in the Haftorah. And the example that we see at the beginning of the Parsha, it started last week and it continues this week, is that of Pinhas. Pinhas sees something wrong in the community. He sees the people are straying for foreign gods, or they're doing other things that they're not supposed to do. Given the youth is in the room, I'm going to just say other things they're not supposed to do. And it makes him so angry that he flies into a murderous rage and kills two people in front of everyone. And the murder of these two people does in fact help the Israelites stop doing what they're not supposed to be doing. It makes God cease the plague that was coming on the people as a punishment. It does what it's supposed to do, sort of, or not sort of, it does. And then at the beginning of the parsha that we read today, God gives Pinhas a brit shalom, a covenant of peace. And this is a phrase that doesn't appear anywhere else. We don't know what this covenant of peace means. And so our commentaries, of course, try to decipher, well, what could it mean that Pinhas is given this covenant of peace? So some say it's a gift, it's a prize. His zealotry was the right thing to do. It stopped the plague, and so Rashi and part of the Midrash says, good job, covenant of peace is just a bonus reward. Ibn Ezra says, maybe, but I think this covenant of peace is a protection of Pinhas from the relatives of the people that he killed. Because in the ancient world, we would have to get into this whole Montague Capulet thing where he kills Zimri, and then Zimri's family has to come for him, and then his family goes for right and back and forth and back and forth. So God gives a brit shalom, according to Ibn Ezra, to put a stop to that and say, fine, the zealotry served its purpose, but now it's got to be done. And Sforno goes even further and says that this brit shalom is actually protection against the malach hamavet, because Pinhas did what you're not supposed to. He killed these people with no trial, with no anything, with no due process. It's not okay. God is supposed to come for him because that's murder and that's bad. And so the brit shalom is letting everyone know, okay, you know what? He's going to be okay on this. And Amek Davar goes even further and says that the brit shalom is protection from himself. And that Pinchas's zealotry for doing what he thought was necessary to stop the sinning that he saw in the people, maybe did what's supposed to do, that it got rid of this plague and it stopped the sinning, but left unchecked inside Pinhas, this zeal, this rage would lead to bad things. And the covenant of peace is God's way of saying, okay, calm down a little. It's time for you to take a breath, to chill out, and to have peace. this example of what it is to have zeal, I think, contrasts with a story that is in the Haftorah that's linked to this parsha. It's not the one that we read today because we're in the series of admonition, but I think that the linking of the Haftorah is important here, because the Haftorah that we normally read for Pinhas is that of Elijah. And Elijah and Elisha and the transition from one to the other. And the story that happens in this parsha is that Elijah is, like all prophets, having a hard time getting his message across to the people, and he's in a bad place. And God comes to Elijah and says, hey man, what's the problem? And paraphrasing. And Elijah says, everybody hates me, everybody hates you, and no one is listening to me. That's actually about exactly what he says. So God says to Elijah, okay, Elijah, go up on the mountain. And this is where we have this famous scene where there's a storm, right? And he looks out from the mountain and God was not in the storm, and there's a fire, but God is not in the fire, right? The whirlwind, whatever it is. And then it says, there was the kol d'mamadaka, there's the small, still voice. And that's where Elijah finds God, the small, still voice inside of him. And he comes down from the mountain having had this revelation. And God says to Elijah, as soon as he steps off the mountain, hey man, how's it going? And Elijah repeats the complaint verbatim that he gave before. Everybody hates me, everybody hates you, and no one is listening to me. And the next line is God saying, Elijah, I need you to go to this town and appoint Elisha to be your successor. You're done being my prophet. And I think in this moment, and I'll admit I have no commentary to back me up, so I'm out on a limb. But God says to Elijah, you have to appoint a new prophet because revelation didn't change him. If you have the same complaint before and after seeing and speaking with God, you can't be a prophet of the Lord anymore. And in this, I think we see a contrast to Pinhas in a bad way. Pinhas sees something in the world and flies into a murderous rage. Elijah sees God's self and is unmoved. And so for all of us, we need to find something in the middle. When we see things in our world, when we act in our world, when things come to us, we want to try to find some sort of middle path to that, right? Maimonides and Aristotle both want us to have moderation in the way that we approach the world. And so how can we, when we look at all of the important events that are happening in our lives, find this balance? Because if you're not moved, then what are we doing here? Why are we here? But if we are moved too much, if we try to overdo every single thing, then we're going to need a breach shalom. So there's a lot that is happening. I mean, do I have to list it? As we go through our world and we see things, we see assassination attempts on a foreign president, former, excuse me. God, Lord have mercy on us all. That's when we see, Shabbat Shalom. All right, so. It can make us feel a lot. A president stopping his campaign in the middle of the re-election campaign to pass the torch on to the vice president. The vice president stepping up and taking on this mantle in a historic and impressive way. We can feel scared. We can feel pride. We can feel like we want to do something, either for or against. The point is that we need to be able to feel something when we look at what's going on. We are living in historic times. There is a lot happening in our world, in our country. There's a lot happening in other countries. We witnessed the Prime Minister of Israel this week speaking to Congress. That might make you feel different things, but it's got to make you feel something. This is an incredible thing that the leader of our people in our autonomous land was asked to speak to the government of the most powerful country in the world. That's important. That matters. So you have to watch it and pay attention and feel what you're going to feel. And even in the non-political realm, if you watched the opening ceremonies of the Olympics this week. First of all, what was that? Second of all, it should have, or did at least for me, brought tears to my eyes. Right? Thinking about, in some ways, tears to my eyes for the antiquated nationalist notions that the Olympics represents, and also tears to my eyes for the unity and the hope and the feelings that this beautiful country trying to create art for everyone and bringing people together and people competing together and everyone waving. It's incredible and it's wonderful, and we should feel something. So I want to leave you both with words of the Parsha and words of Rabbi David Hartman. So from the Parsha, what does it do? After Pinhas gets this Brit Shalom, the very next thing that we get is a census of the Jewish people and then a list of all the holidays. And I think in this is God trying to show us what to do when we are moved to zeal for a cause, right? Which we need to be. We can't be like Elijah, otherwise it's time to pass the torch on. We have to be moved in some way. So what do? We look and see where everyone else is, and we find where our family and our friends are, and we count ourselves among a group of people. Because sometimes if you're not moved, turn to the person next to you, and they are, and ask them what they see. Or if you're super moved, and you don't think the people around you are, ask them why not. Ask them how this makes them feel. We have to be counted together as a people. And I want to leave you, David Hartman, in one of the last lectures that he gave when he was alive. I was fortunate enough to be at it in Jerusalem. And he was speaking deeply about what it means to be moved by the Jewish practice, to be moved by the state of Israel, to be moved. And as he was talking about emotion and talking about this, one of the more Orthodox-looking people in the room stood up and was clearly just aghast and said, Rabbi, how can the author of Maimonides and the Philosophic Quest be saying these things? You're saying that the law doesn't matter, that only what you feel matters, and how can a rationalist like you think this? And David Hartman looks at him and says, I was a Maimonidean for 65 years. I want to feel something from my Judaism now. And it was this beautiful moment to watch. And it's a lesson for all of us. There's a lot happening, to be sure. We can feel different ways, but we have to feel something. We can find a way to limit what we get access to and limit the consumption of all of the media, but when we do, we got to let it in. Let it move us to do something, to act in the world, and to be the people that we want to be the, not quite Pinchases, but to be the people who act to make this world a better place. Shabbat Shalom.